Okay, are we good? It's try or die app. They've conceded the moral hazard argument that U.S. presence in Israel, specifically supplying offensive weapons, causes Israeli leaders to be emboldened to attack Iran. That causes extinction because Iran is on the brink of getting nuclear weapons. Only the plan solves by reining Israel in and stopping them from taking aggressive actions. We're going for framework, plan, focus. Weigh the case against the competitive opportunity cost. That means links must be causal to and outweigh the 1EC. You should be as confused as I am about the decision in the 2NR to ditch fairness and say weigh the AF when they didn't touch the reasons why fairness is important under a plan focus model. Our internal link is not that they exclude the case, but that they can shift the discussion in the debate to whatever they want. That is why they moot the case. Not because they can compare representational offense with consequential offense, but because they can talk about any disagreement with the 1EC as a win condition, which is bad because it gives the affirmative debater no stasis for understanding this. The blow up on framework is unwarranted by the 1EC, which means you should choose to protect the 2AR from new arguments, which we'll answer anyway. A couple framing arguments that they conceded. First is that fairness is the only thing that the ballot can exclude, or that the ballot can solve, because they have dropped the fact that we cannot solve the things with the ballot, the things that Wilderson is talking about, like debate. It's rhetorical problems, which means that the only thing that your ballot can solve in this round is preserving competitive equity for both sides to be able to engage. Our argument is not weighing the case as important, but rather the links to the epistemology other than the plan of the 1EC is bad because it's unpredictable. It lets them talk about anything and make it a win condition because it is incoherent and impossible to compare between two different layers like that. We'll answer all of their link terms case K-tricks here, but first, since we're going to answer their arguments about the worldview stuff, they said that worldviews is most accessible. This is wrong. There's no reason why we have any worldview other than the plan, and why that isn't outweighed by fairness. Fairness is an a priori because they have dropped the fact that fairness outweighs everything else. Next, they say that they define what an opportunity cost is, but this is wrong because it means that they would only get arguments in context of the desirability of the plan, which means that only consequential offense related to the plan matters, which means that justifies perm double blind. If the alternative really does cause this new theory of international relations, which is able to resolve all of this, then it definitely can overcome the link to the plan because the status quo is fully invested in the liberal international order. They make a few arguments here. First was the link extension about civilizational evangelism and how we want to extend anti-blackness to China. This is wrong when they've conceded China is revisionist, which impact turns the link and means that moving presence to China is good to stop them invading Taiwan. Next, they say that we want to torture Chinese people. Again, this is unwarranted. There's no evidence to support this. They have no defense against these claims, which means that you should air AF here. Next, they say that they make these arguments about how Israel can keep up genocide and that we only reduce offensive presence. This is a link of omission. Yes, Israel might not be perfect, but we actively stop a proximate cause of Israel doing bad things in Palestine. Now, they say Saudi Arabia and Israel exist, but yes, them existing is just a link to the status quo, not the affirmative. They're quoting our evidence and saying proxies get involved does not turn case because it just means that proxies would get involved. We solved that because our internal link is Israel aggressives, which means they don't access that. The 2NR arguments are outframed by the fact that they have dropped that specifically weighing the case against opportunity cost is necessary for any form of competitive equity, which comes first in your decision. It's the only thing the ballot can resolve. Their arguments miss because there's no way to compare these things, and they can talk about whatever they want. Unpredictable, unfair.
Good debate. Good debate.
coach was gonna come over, but
You want me to wait?
yeah.
Okay.
I just asked him how far away he said.
Yeah, no worries.
Scott?
No, Gordon.
Oh.
Scott?
Scott's not making the walk.
Said my coach.
He's at white.
Scott is doing his thing.
Scott's nervously pacing in Whitehall right now.
There's Scott or mine?
Huh?
There's Scott or mine?
Ours is being obnoxious and playing music and acting like a Baltimore guy. Just being insufferable.
He's just being himself.
Scott.
I don't know their Scott very well. I don't know their Scott.
Our Scott's just a Baltimore guy. You know all the Baltimore guys. Iggy, Chris Randall, anybody who's been in Baltimore, they can only be more. They can never be less.
It's true.
That's a great way to explain it.
Yeah, it is true.
It's their natural state of being. So
I
it's
saw
just,
Randall with him.
yeah,
earlier.
I'm somehow the calm one on the coaching staff, which is not like what I'm known for.
Who else is there?
It's myself, Scott, and Chris. That's what we do.
I'm not trying to hold you up.
No, you're I'm fine. You didn't say anything. You say it to him. He's like nervously waiting.
Yeah, obviously.
Huh?
Yeah.
What's his senior year?
Great.
Oh, he says just do it. He said he's too far. I'm good.
Everyone's good?
Yeah.
Alright. Congratulations. I thought this was an excellent debate. And I was very impressed. Both of you were very good. It was a low point win for the app. So, two things that I thought were relevant. First, you're a senior.
Mm-hmm.
How, do you want the decision? I mean, up to you what you want.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, two things that I thought were relevant. One was the link stuff, and the second is like framework perm stuff. So I'm going to start with framework perm stuff, and then I'll go to the link stuff. Framework. I thought the 2NR decision to like concede this is kind of a mistake, and even if you're not conceding their I didn't really interpret what you were doing as conceding to their interpretation entirely. You're like largely saying like they get the plan, but we are doing whatever, which I thought was consistent with what your interpretation was to begin with. So I evaluated your interpretation versus the AF's interpretation. I thought fairness was like really undercovered in the 2NR, and they make like pretty persuasive arguments, basically like this fairness paradox argument that like you will require fair evaluation, so fairness comes first, and you know they're bigger on fairness is the only thing the ballot can solve. We can't solve like rhetorical problems in debate or like representations that we'll discuss or your links. But independent of that, like I thought this was relevant insofar as I thought like the alternative, it deals with some perm competition arguments, but I didn't think it invalidated you entirely because I thought the strongest portions of the 2NR were links that were to the plan. And the other thing on framework was you made the argument that it's like most accessible because it's the only way for black students to engage outside of plan focus, and they say that it is possible under theirs, and they do define opportunity cost because they're saying the plan is the worldview, and then the links facilitate that. But again, I didn't think this was game over because I thought the strongest portions of the 2NR were the links. So I'll go there. The first is the civilizational managerialism one. I thought they were correct that they have an offensive justification for why deterring China is good based on this claim that China is revisionist, and I thought the 2NR was lacking impact here. So even if true, say like, you know, China is, we contain and maintain China. The extent of impact explanation is like, you know, we ally with fascists in this way, and the 2NR phrase was literally we torture Chinese people in Taiwan, which like I like didn't really understand. And it seems like that's their point is that's occurring now. Like China is like rude to Taiwanese people, or like Uyghurs. So that was one. And then I thought like kind of they were right that there was like kind of unwarranted there. So I thought the impact was missing there, and certainly not enough to beat the case, right? Which is like pretty big like war impact that you all also agree with. Second was this arms control link. This I thought was where you all were doing, or the NAG was doing much better. And specifically the argument was that like essentially the plan provides moral capital to greenlight worse violence in Israel. but I don't know how I could causally explain to the neg how this is true, given I thought, like, and this is, like, where I feel less confident, but, like, both teams could theoretically be correct. Like, you all are like, there's this moral capital that we could get as a result of, you know, withdrawing presence, that Israel is now, like, only in self-defense. And then the AF is like, Israel is emboldened to do worse things because the U.S., they think the U.S. will back them, and withdrawing presence solves that because U.S. is no longer backing everything they're doing. Ultimately, I thought their stuff was more persuasive because they're also including the argument that the existence of Israel, like Israel being bad, is to the status quo, the alternative to not overcome that, and if it were to overcome that, per the and this is where framework was relevant, if it were to overcome that, then the the perm double bind becomes relevant. And framework does implicate that, which I think both teams are agreeing on. The last thing that I considered was, and the closest I was to voting neg was, you start with, you know, too many critique tricks, and you start with this thing about winning the ontological thesis proves the higher order is collapsing, and it's like structurally inevitable. And you say extinction is inevitable in every sector and makes every case impact inevitable. But if they win, they solve those impacts, like, kind of proximately, and by inserting the link, that seems to implicate it. And absent, like, much more alternative explanation for how you can solve that, like, I thought the 2NR would benefit from saying more, like, alt solves the case things, other than what I have on my flow is alt solves the case, it's try or die, because the 1EC's theorization of IR feeds into an unsustainable nature of nuclear order. But I don't know why, like, what the alternative does. Like, what is your counter-imaginary? What is your like, what are you imagining? What is your worldview that's different? And my understanding is, like, at least it would exclude the plan, which I think is more likely to solve those impacts, at least in the short term, even if the IR order will collapse in the future. Both teams seem to agree there's some value in achieving harmonization. And the last thing is, I thought both teams would benefit severely from impact calculus. They didn't say, I didn't think, like, the 1NC included this extinction K, and that wasn't really in the 2NR, and like, the 2NR didn't say anything about extinction outweighs, and, like, you have the only extinction impact. I thought that was going to be, like, a really big deal, and, like, the fact that that would have really cleaned up a lot for you, because, like, I mean, that's where my struggle is. Like, they could theoretically maybe be correct about this, like, Israel, like, moral cover argument, and you could maybe be correct about this Israel moral hazard argument. It's very difficult to explain, like, which, like, absent, like, more comparison, even if just at impact level, like, that could have been a tiebreaker for either team. Questions?
So, how do you evaluate, like, the only burden for competition is if our ethical orientations are mutually exclusive?
Well, I thought their framework answered that, because they say, and I thought, like, this is what I gathered from both their 1AR explanation of framework and their 2NR explanation, which I think is made most clear when the 1AR said, the only worldview that the 1AC has is that the plan is good. The plan is their worldview, right? So that's not their ethical orientation is their worldview, the plan is the worldview. So even under your framework, right, or extrinsically, like, their fairness claims are based on the idea that the 2AR explains it, like, the neg can shift the debate away from the plan towards some ethical orientation. Even if that ethical orientation includes the plan, their offense is about the shift away from plan focus. Like, they're saying plan focus good.
So, alright, so I guess their framework interprets as, quote, weigh the case against the competitive opportunity cost. Links based on epistemology must be contextualized to the plan's desirability. Was it kind of the second sentence?
The second sentence, and if we're just looking at the 1AR, after they like read this one card about or they didn't read, like, later on my flow of framework, I didn't think not the card. On my flow framework, they say debate is a game, no subjectivity shift basically, because args are read to win, so fairness must come first. And then they say the only worldview we defend is the plan happens. And I thought that was the thing that they contextualized their framework interp as. And in the doc, it's like, their interp is wrong. The only worldview the app defends is one in which the plan happens. Anything else is just letting the neg characterize the app. I thought that was the most important part.
I guess my qualms about going for K and, like, ever is like the perm double line. Do you think there's a
I would
way?
agree. I mean, I think framework is the way out of it. Like, you identified
Yeah.
that, but you have to invest way more in the framework debating.
I know it won't matter for me in the future, but I guess like, is there because I tried like saying like I tried not using the language of causation to explain all this as an ethical orientation. So the F is the opposite of that. Like it's not like a counterplan that causationally solves our impacts. It's just an ethical orientation that has to be opposite to the F. Is that like?
Right, I
Is there a
agree,
way
but
to
then,
get out of it, or
but then,
no?
if you weigh the case against a competitive opportunity cost, like opportunity cost logic is like causality based.
Okay, so is there?
So like you're I understand what you're saying. Like you're correct that like that's why I'm saying you need more framework debating because these two are mutually exclusive frameworks in my mind. Like you're trying to kind of play this middle ground where you're like, wait, only we're defining what opportunity cost means, which is opportunity cost in ethical orientations, but like that doesn't like really track to me because it's like opportunity cost logic like presumes some level of causation.
Okay.
Like what is the opportunity cost between two ethical affirmations if it's not based on causality?
So I guess when you went for the K, did you ever go for like they get the plan? And,
No.
No, so you always just no like case.
Yeah, like literally no plan ever.
Okay.
It's either no plan ever or you have to say like they get the plan but like we get basically like PIK. Like we get
We
we
also
steal the
cause
plan,
it.
yeah. And I would have been fine with that too. Like I thought that's what you were setting up where you're like
Floating pay.
yeah, it's like a pick, but or you're like, listen, we fiat world peace and they don't get to compete because and then basically all the reasons why excluding the plan is good.
Oh.
But like even then, right? Like those arguments are about I mean they correctly identified. Like you're shifting the focus of the debate away from the plan. You can't both be like, yeah, like plan focus is good and our thing is completely divorced from causal effects of the plan.
Okay.
So to answer your question, like it's not just that you don't have to just say like the only way you can win in my book isn't like just excluding the plan entirely, but you can also win by including the plan and saying it's irrelevant in various ways.
Okay. Alright, yeah. I don't have any other questions. But
One, if the 2NR had explained it as a pick, would you evaluate that as a new argument and give new answers, or do you think an argument in the 1
The 1NC clearly didn't say it was a pick, but also I think cross-exing is helpful on that. Like just like can the alternative result in the plan? Yes, no.
I feel like I asked that and he was like shifty about it. What do you think is good in those
Just-
cases?
For me, like if you say this is a yes/no question, you can only answer with yes or no, and then they shift about it. Then like I mean your thing is so insane for like this is unfair.
Okay.
Like they should have said it earlier, right? Like like I think like I would be like very sympathetic obviously then like this is a new argument, don't evaluate it.
Yeah.
If they were like yes it's a pick, then you obviously have
Okay.
to answer it, and if they say no then you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
No, you can go.
And I understand the strategic benefit of like being shifty about it, but like the response to that isn't to like continue letting them talk. It's to be like set up the question as like, especially in front of me, like, yes, no. Like I only want to hear yes or no. And like
okay.
if they don't say yes or no, they're like clearly evading. So.
Okay. So to make it like not a low point win, do you think like extinction outweighs, or what additional
Most of
arguments do you
the
need?
most of the low point win was because he sounds insane.
He does sound pretty good. All right, I'll give
Kid's
you
the
that.
best spreader I've seen in policy or LD in like years. So.
He's in my top 3. I've always been a fan. All right, so just it wasn't strategy,
Like speaks were very high like across the board.
but it wasn't strategy.
No.
Okay.
Extinction outweighs or something.
Okay. Do you think like a try or die focus, like I tried to say at
Yes,
the
yes.
beginning, but like
You started with that, which
try
is
or
why
die
I
comes-
voted for you. To
Oh,
be clear.
okay.
But like you're basically making the argument that like only we have uniqueness, but I thought that should have been like
a lot more?
yeah, like I think impact stuff should have been more because like you have to be like only we have an extinction impact. Given that's like a massive tiebreaker, so even if they win some of their moral cover turn or something, like it won't be existential because the U.S. wouldn't be drawn into the conflict.
Okay.
Like that's like. Then like they can win some risk of like Israel will still like do bad things and like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like,
So
being
you're
more
saying, like-
assumptive of that, and for you the opposite, right? Like basically like if you had been like, this is way worse, like if the U.S. left them, like Israel would throw like fucking everything immediately because they feel like they have to get it all out. Now that they know the U.S. can't win a sustained war, like something like that like assumes what the other team is saying and is comparative would be really helpful.
Okay, so for the 2AR, do you think that just needs to be, like, yes, they have impact arguments if they win their turns case, like the torturing people in China or conflict in Yemen, but even if those are bad, extinction is worse? Okay, and that would make it, like, the optimal 2AR?
Yeah, that would, yeah.
Okay.
And then,
do you think there needs to be defense to their theory? Like, I thought about extending
well, you should
Agathangelou
just
wrong.
talk about it.
Okay.
I don't think defense to the theory is necessary, but like when they say like way too many K tricks, there are 3 of them. They list 3 K tricks that they say are like critical. You should say something about each of the K tricks,
Okay.
right? Like they've numbered them for you. Like it's very easy for the judge to follow.
Oh, wait. The 3 K tricks were alt solves case, turns
Alt
case.
solves case was the last one. The
and
second one
ethics
was
first?
link and impact immediately
Okay.
turn case. And then the first one was winning ontological thesis proves IR order is collapsing. And this is the one they spent the most time on.
Okay. So, like, theory of power. Okay, got it.
And
So
like
just
all you have to say is
extend.
like, for this, at least for me, is like, alt can't solve it.
Mhm.
So it's only about like which impacts you know either team can solve, or like basically the link. So it's not independent of the link.
So do you think
Which is kind of how I resolved it, but like I can see like a ballot for the neg that's like IR order is structurally collapsing, so but then the so part is where I'm like a little confused.
Or I guess I say like, that means it's not any team elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean I understand elsewhere, but like right? So like that just means like it's some like what they said, try or die act, right?
Well,
Like,
was there a presumption ballot, do you think, that maybe we could have gone?
yeah, that would have been helpful too. It's like, you know, you're like, but you need some implication to that. You're like, it makes every 1EC impact inevitable, but they're like, that means like if there's any risk that the 1EC solves, like, it's apt, right? Like, I would be more on, and the big thing for me, like the way to get out of this is like, our alternative solves it, like, fucking like global peace, like, IR order no longer collapses, like we like,
But then how would that be double blind?
Huh?
How would that be perm double?
well, that framework.
Alright, so how do you beat, like, then what's the purpose of like extending your power? Why don't you just go for like, plan don't matter, you win.
Well, so against their thing, right? Some of the things you're saying with their interps, like they're very similar,
Mhm.
but with your interps, like it can be helpful. So their stuff is more set up for saying which case is good, right? So I would have been persuaded if you're like, hold them to the text of their interpretation. The text of their interpretation says nothing about what the alternative must do, or the text of their interpretation doesn't do that. They later clarified what a worldview meant. Like, there's some like tricks you could include with that, and like that can be helpful, but like substantively, they're not really different to me.
Mhm. Yeah, we do.
Do you think we should word the framework interpret differently? Or
You need more
include stuff that
stuff.
would be off can?
Yeah. Weighing the case is also. Oh, another thing you could have said is like, we let them weigh the case. This doesn't say the plan.
Do you think, like, how's this, weigh the plan against opportunity cost?
Don't use the word weigh.
Evaluate the plan against an opportunity, the unique opportunity cost of the plan.
Alternative is
Links
responsible for material solvency. Links must be causal to plan
And outweigh.
implementation. And
Okay.
you
Just
don't
like
have to
how
say
to
it
make
outweighs,
stuff.
like that's like
Okay.
logical, but like if the link is causal to plan implementation, but it doesn't outweigh the case, then like you're gonna win anyways.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Congrats, y'all. Good luck.
Yeah.
Congrats.
The area.